yeah, the way I would have done is say second quartile is low amounts of nighttime light exposure and define what that is. Third quartile is more light exposure, and then fourth, maximum amount of light exposure at night. And basically what you see is that the probability of having worse major depressive symptoms linearly increases as you go from the second to third to fourth quartile. So more nighttime light exposure, worse for you, and there's a dose response, if you will, of the effect. Now, we can march through or describe figure 2 pretty quickly by saying the same thing is true. Now we're just talking about nighttime light exposure for generalized anxiety disorder. So that's panel C. Bipolar disorder, although the difference between the second and the third quartile in bipolar disorder isn't as dramatic. Once you get up to the fourth quartile, bipolar symptoms get much worse when people are getting nighttime light exposure. I really want to emphasize that point because they go on in the discussion of this paper to reemphasize that point several times. In fact, they say that while light exposure during the day, of course, we will go into the data, is beneficial for mental health, for people with bipolar disorder, it seems that light exposure at night is especially problematic, independent of how much sunlight they're getting during the day. So your bipolar, the person with bipolar disorder who's struggling with either a manic or a depressive episode, who's making a point to get sunlight during the day, who's also getting light exposure at night, is making their symptoms worse. And keep in mind, they couldn't completely control this, but this is largely independent of things like sleep duration. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the person's sleeping less, although in a manic episode, presumably they are. It's independent of exercise.